welcome to our webinar. Today we're going to be looking at the importance of green spaces and really how local authorities are vital to protect and maintain them. I'm sure our experiences, certainly what I've seen at Yotta over the years, has been budgets for green spaces management really reducing. And I've even unfortunately seen examples of local authorities having to concrete over green areas just to reduce maintenance costs. And I think if the recent pandemic has taught us anything, it's that those things that have previously been undervalued suddenly become incredibly important. And if you combine that with the changing climate, green spaces should be high on everyone's agenda. So essentially, we've got a great panel with us today to discuss that. We've got Steve Reid, joins us from West Sussex County Council, where he's Director of Environment and also Chair of the ADEPT Environment Board. We've got Mark Spence from Yotta's consulting team. Mark has many years of working in the environment sector, and also got Alex Croston, who heads up our product specialist team, who'll be taking us through a brief demonstration of where Yotta can support local authorities and really how we can involve the public in that as well. Now, we're holding a Q&A session at the end. If you look up at the top right, you should see a chat button there. So please investigate that, leave any questions for us, and we'll deal with that at the end. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Steve Reid, who's going to take us through valuing green spaces and a strategic overview of that. Thanks, Steve. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that introduction, Rob. I shall just check that my screen is showing to you. Could you just confirm that's come up, please, Rob?
No, not got that yet, Steve.
Okay, let's try again. Has that come through now?
Got that now, Steve.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Rob, and my thanks to Yotta on behalf of ADEPT for this opportunity to contribute to the webinar. As chair of the ADEPT Environment Board, I've been asked by ADEPT to be a spokesperson. My authority on this subject is general, and if you've had a chance to read my biography, mainly stemming from, I argue, being a user of green space rather than an academic or an expert perspective. But fortuitously, my team's authority is built on real understanding of the subject. So a big thank you to Lords Madagascar Elliott. Lords is a public health practitioner embedded in my team, part of Place Services at West Sussex County Council. And she's there to assist in the promotion of green infrastructure within the planning process because of its wider benefits, particularly in terms of health for all. Her role is much more than that, but I'm indebted to her for her assistance. Now, the provision of green infrastructure is widely and instinctively recognised as contributing towards creating places where people want to live and work. It's an essential component of good planning for urban and rural areas, particularly in the face of the great issues of our time. Rob has already alluded to these: climate change and health protection. However, increased awareness of the importance of green infrastructure doesn't always go hand in hand with a full understanding of what it is and the range of benefits it can deliver and how it can be promoted and delivered through existing policies and process. What is green infrastructure? Well, effectively, it is the network of natural and semi-natural features, green spaces, rivers, lakes that intersperse and connect villages, towns and cities. Now, individually, these elements are green infrastructure assets, and that's analogous, I think, to the concept of natural capital. And the roles that these assets play are green infrastructure functions, analogous to natural services. And when appropriately planned, designed and managed, the assets and functions deliver a wide range of benefits. These can be formal and intensively managed. They could be left as unmanaged, wild spaces, or very often somewhere in between the two. They can be multifunctional, whereby the green element is a positive incidental benefit of some other function, for example, a cemetery, a canal, a cycle path, an allotment. Or it could be that the amenity value is the main purpose, for example, parks and gardens. They may or may not incorporate hard infrastructure, such as transport corridors. The picture, by the way, with the red bicycle is one recently from my holiday in the western part of Scotland. The spectacular Sustrans 78 cycleway. If you ever have the chance to do that, it is extraordinarily beautiful. But green infrastructure can be on previously undeveloped land, or it could be the restoration of a brownfield site. It can be owned and managed, or not managed, as the case may be, by public authorities, individuals, private sector, charities, faith groups, could be almost anybody. What's the importance of green infrastructure? Well, in terms of development, green infrastructure is especially relevant to both the housing and economic growth agendas and to urban regeneration. Done well, it enables development to go hand in hand with the protection, enhancement, and creation of new environmental assets. It's a means to place the environment in the centre of the planning process by facilitating a linked, multifunctional network of spaces with benefits for people and wildlife. And green infrastructure underpins the sustainability of a town or city, including making it more resilient to the effects of climate change. And it's one means of enabling local authorities to meet their duty to conserve biodiversity. But in addition to trying to help resolve tension between development and consideration of the natural environment, there are also human health benefits. Poor environments cause disease-inducing stress, whereas performative environments provide multifunctional opportunities, economic, environmental, social and cultural opportunities to combat stress. Now, if we strive for wellness, and I really like to go back to the old, I think it's 1948 World Health Organization definition of health, which is a state of complete physical, mental and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. Well, then green infrastructure is a cost-effective agent for wellness, a means of building personal and societal resilience, and there is a growing body of academic research to back this up. One of my interests is the role of local authorities in managing the tensions that sometimes exist between competing health and societal, environmental and economic demands. The economic benefits of green infrastructure are now well evidenced, and disregarding these can incur societal costs in the longer term. Green infrastructure contributes to the resilience and sustainability of economic growth through reducing key risks, such as, very topically for the moment, flooding and temperature extremes. Examples include sustainable urban drainage systems and green roofs. The services these assets provide bring economic as well as environmental benefits. And green infrastructure can often, in the first place, provide more cost-effective solutions than other alternatives, but investment in green assets can also avoid costs, such as those that arise from the impact of flooding. These risks and costs to society will increase with projected climate change impacts. Green infrastructure planning and delivery is essential to underpin future sustainable economic development in local areas. Green infrastructure increases the attractiveness and distinctiveness of local areas, drawing in investment. This attractiveness also increases visitors and associated spend. An accessible, attractive outdoor environment is important, encouraging physical activity, which in turn improves physical and mental health, thereby reducing the public cost burden. The COVID lockdown has caused many to reconsider their priorities as the need to live close to work has diminished. Indisputably, those areas with higher amenity value will be more favoured for these wider benefits in the future. Wherever we live or work, health improvements increase productivity. This in turn allows health expenditure to be invested elsewhere. Now, while nature can, left to its own devices, often take care of itself, when we're considering the need to balance the environment with development, planning is key. ADEPT's blueprint for accelerating climate change action and a green recovery at the local level calls for revisions to the national planning policy framework to provide greater priority to protecting and enhancing green spaces and infrastructure that we need to support community resilience and climate adaptation. The rationale for this is as I've described earlier. The blueprint highlights specific measures such as empowering local authorities to set green infrastructure standards through local plans to deliver on both a climate and ecological emergency, and to refuse development where these requirements are not met. Providing stronger protection for all spaces that are important for nature, including priority habitats and non-statutory local wildlife sites. Setting a requirement for local plans to provide better access to good quality nature-rich green space for everyone within 5 minutes walk of their home. And providing a stronger reminder of the duty to preserve trees on development sites to enable local enforcement. To ensure that the new National Infrastructure Plan includes green infrastructure and allocates adequate funding for delivery and better understanding of green assets. Now, I'm not the best placed person to give a view on how the proposals in the recent planning white paper address these issues. The nub of it seems to be the tension that exists between streamlining the system and sufficiency relating to environmental protection and enhancement. As is so often the case, the devil is in the detail that has yet to be fully set out. ADEPT will be responding to the consultation, and my planning board colleagues will undoubtedly address these issues. Our existing objectives, though, can and are being met in a number of ways. We can use green infrastructure assets to support health and well-being of people and businesses in local plans and neighbourhood plans. We can demonstrate and deliver economic benefits through the green infrastructure framework and by gathering data. Use of public engagement to improve opportunities for enjoyment and maintenance, as well as to develop understanding of the wildlife, natural beauty, cultural heritage, and the special qualities at a very local and wider level. As I'm sitting here speaking to you this morning, I'm very, very fortunate. I have looking out at my own garden and beyond that to part of the South Downs National Park. And it just illustrates to me that point. It's right down focally and then wider over a national park that's something like 100 miles in width. It improves access opportunities to natural green space for all sectors of society so as to help address health and social inequalities and to encourage the enhancement and delivery of green infrastructure through developer contributions. So what's our role? Well, local authorities have what I would call an active statutory providing and controlling roles in terms of managing some green infrastructure, such as parks, gardens, highway verges, and also managing tensions that proposed development imposes through the planning system. But we are part of a wider system that relies on many actors. Our wider role includes facilitating, enabling, championing, supporting, promotion, demonstrating, signposting, and linking. In short, providing local leadership and local focus to tackle these with many other agencies. This is my final slide, and it sort of says, well, what of the future? Now, build back better is now synonymous with COVID recovery, but as with so many other things, it's actually as a concept older than it appears. Now, according to our head of communications at West Sussex County Council, the latest phenomena on social media is COVID deniers. There can, however, be few deniers of the benefits of green infrastructure even prior to COVID, and fewer now. We're always going to be in tension for outcomes, resources, ideas of what is for the best. As always, though, the conclusions are that we need to be on our toes to find smarter and more efficient ways of doing things. We need to listen and take people with us. We need to work hard on partnerships. I'm an advocate of what sometimes seems like an old-fashioned concept, evidence-based decision-making. Cooperation saves resources in building that evidence, in finding future-proof solutions, in addressing the true gaps in knowledge and sharing our findings. There are greater gains to be secured through presenting a united and agreed position on the needs, priorities and ambitions of an area as a whole, and be that an area in geographical or conceptual terms. Advocacy to government, the LEPs, funding bodies and others is more powerful and influential when both robustly evidenced and coordinated. I will leave you with that thought and return you to Rob. Thank you very much.
Steve, thank you very much for that. I think that really framed, the benefits of green infrastructure, and I think was so important was how that affects and runs through the rest of the community. So I'm going to hand over to Mark now, who's going to take us through how we actually manage that green infrastructure. Mark, I'll hand over to you now if you've got your screen ready. And unmuting yourself, Mark. Oh, you're on.
Yep, I had my screen sorted, but then of course the mute button disappeared. So hopefully hopefully you can hear me now. All right, thanks for that, Rob, and thank you, Steve. Very insightful, although you did steal a couple of my things, or rather I'm going to reiterate a couple of your things, so that's not a problem. So I'm going to talk about managing green assets, but in true Irish style, I'm going to start with grey assets. Now, the reason I'm starting with grey assets is that the grey assets are what we are typically familiar with when it comes to asset management systems. These are our bollards, our footways, our lighting columns, or bridges, and these are typically well qualified and well quantified. We generally have a good idea how much it would cost to replace a lighting column, for example, or to reinstate a footway. And given the historic asset management approach, we tend to have a general picture and understanding of our grey asset. Our green assets, on the other hand, well, what are our green assets? Steve has already covered that, but how well do we manage them? And then on top of our, well, sorry, not literally on top of our green assets, alongside our green assets, we have our blue assets. So we have our waterways or runnels or swales or surface drains, etc. Effectively anything that involves water. Now, from an asset management perspective, I firmly believe our focus here should be shifting from simply removing water as quickly as possible to a much more sustainable approach, such as SUDs, where we will, and I will talk about these in a little bit more detail later on. So the essentials of asset management. Over my 20-odd years in the asset and green asset management, two questions I often ask anybody that will listen to me basically is, where are your assets and what condition they are in? Of course, our green assets include much more than just the trees, but if we don't know what we've got, how can we possibly manage that? Some organisations are better than others, and I am certainly not here to judge, but merely to re-emphasise the point If you don't know what you've got and what condition it is in, you need to do something about it. I'm pretty quick too. So what about the information you do have? Is it timely and up to date? Where is it? Is it on paper? Is it in a digital file? Is it attached to something else? Is it accessible? Is it in somebody's mind? Is all your green asset information stored on one hard drive somewhere? Not a good idea. But can you answer the question? When was your last tree survey carried out? Can you answer the question, how many trees have not been surveyed in the last 15 months in high risk and high consequence areas? Does your tree works backlog simply say things like fell the tree on Hamilton Terrace? Well, what tree does that relate to? If there's only one tree on Hamilton Terrace, well, that's fine, it's not a problem. But if anybody knows Leamington, we've got quite a few trees on Hamilton Terrace, and Alex will be showing you that later on. How much do you rely on tacit information? This is one of those occasions where ignorance is certainly not bliss. So what do we do? How do we get there? How do we start to build our green asset management? One of my projects currently involves a plethora of tree-related data, but it's out of date. And as a result, it is of little use. But worse, it could actually be more of a liability. The descriptions within the data is vague, and it's almost impossible to glean any meaningful information. It is, of course, an important archive. They have no positional information within their data, so they don't know where these bits and pieces relate to. There may be a little bit of locational information, such as referring to a road name. So what should the customer do? Our advice was actually quite simple. First of all, identify those areas with the greatest need. From a duty of care perspective, identify those areas where the consequence of a tree coming down is greatest. Places where you've got a high footfall. For example, the roads going up to the school, parks, or where you've got frequent stationary traffic. Excuse me. Secondly, prioritize those areas. Thirdly, group them into meaningful but manageable units. In this particular case, we're calling them green management units, GMUs. Everything needs a TLA. And fourthly, action. Now, action, a visual inspection process. Record individual trees with notable issues by exception, including their location, etc. Otherwise, flag the GMU as being with the suitable condition. This approach allows us to connect other pertinent assets within the GMU rather than just the green assets themselves. We can pull in the relevant grey assets, we can pull in the relevant blue assets. For example, we could pull in the gullies in the area, sorry, excuse me. And by sharing that information from other departments and organisations, we can quickly build up a real-world picture of our green infrastructure. A great advantage of this approach is that it is possible to engage a much wider group of, in quotes, inspectors, such as community volunteers, other teams who would be in the area anyway, and even members of the public. But remember, they are simply looking for visual issues, such as a hanging branch in the tree, deadwood, a tree suddenly develops an unnatural lean or suddenly starts to show decay on leaves, or the gullies and soakaways are blocked and things like that. So what about those assets that do have an issue? Quite simple, flag them up as requiring an appropriate comprehensive inspection. So if there's a tree that has developed a sudden lean, that needs to have an appropriate inspection from a tree officer or your appointed arboricultural consultant. But fundamentally, be realistic. It would take an army of volunteers quite some time to capture all your green assets around you. Now, there are some organisations have a lot of green asset information already available, but there are some who don't. But do not beat yourselves up if you haven't built your green asset register in the space of 3 weeks. Be realistic. So, excuse me. A key process in building and maintaining our green asset register involves various surveys, including the all-important tree survey. Having an up-to-date, properly maintained green asset register should reduce greatly your liability under your duty of care as the owner or the custodian of the tree. Essentially, we need to make sure we take reasonable steps to ensure that our trees are as safe as reasonably can be expected. There's a lot of reasonables in there, isn't there? Remember, a tree is not a street lighting column. And please, please, please do not try to manage it as such. As part of our tree survey, as well as just the overall condition of the tree, etc., consideration should also be given to the green canopy and the canopy cover, and ideally by volume, which is much more important in green infrastructure than simply the number of trees. We should be aiming to increase our canopy cover, given all the benefits that tree canopies afford. That's the cooling of the urban environment, air quality, even air quality improvement, etc. And all these benefits of tree canopy cover have been widely publicised over many, many times. Also, having an indication of the canopy cover allows us to extrapolate canopy cover over the forthcoming years. Now, this means we can work with planners, developers, etc., to ensure that even if trees do need to be removed as part of a development, we can and we should insist that the developer is liable for the reinstatement or the reinstating that degree of canopy cover, plus some more within a realistic time frame. But a green asset register should also offer us protection. If I could sing, I would go lot of love and affection. But so a lot of you will have come across CAVAT, the Capital Asset Valuation of Amenity Trees, which was developed by Chris Nealon and the London Tree Officers back in 2008 or somewhere around there. The brilliant thing about CAVAT is it puts a tangible value onto a tree, and that has prompted a sit up and listen reaction because of that tangible asset value. The CAVAT value can help secure compensation against those showing complete disregard for those green assets. If somebody goes and deliberately knocks down a wall, well, they have to pay for rebuilding the wall. So those overzealous developers, disgruntled neighbours and careless lorry drivers can be held to account and reinstate the value of that tree. And what is a typical CAVAT value? Well, it depends on the tree. It could be 5 grand, it could be 15 grand, so on and so forth. But even if you take, say, 10 grand a tree, all those trees across your authority, you will quickly see how you are sitting on a multi-million-pound asset. But if we don't know where that is and the condition it is in, That's a big head scratch. We really need to have that information. Another benefit of having a up-to-date comprehensive green asset register is the ability to make truly informed decisions, not just now, but for the future. We often hear this right tree, right time, right tree, right place, right time. And this was shown to a great example of this was in Worcester during the floods of 2019-2020. These trees here are actually almost New Horizon from Hillier trees, and they're planted along the banks of the river in Worcester there. And for a good 3 months, these trees were up to basically their crown base, which is about 1.8 meters. They were submerged in flood water. So sitting in soggy water for 3 months is probably not what the Mother Nature had initially intended, but these are the same trees in June. The almost New Horizon is very robust when it comes to flooding, etc. So by having a true picture of what we've got, we can make sure that as and when we do need to replace some of our green infrastructure and some of our green assets, we can actually make an informed decision to replace the right tree at the right place at the right time. Now, we're not saying go out and replace all your trees along the side of the river with these elms right away, although Hillier trees would probably love you for that. But the point is, we wouldn't install a street light simply by digging a hole in the ground and putting the lighting column into it. But why do we do that with trees? We let the developer dig a hole, throw a tree into it. Sometimes it's straight, sometimes it's not. But there's no foundation for the tree. There's no foundation for the roots to actually expand, to grow properly. And there's a plethora of solutions out there to allow that soil pit to actually allow the tree to reach its species potential. We often see trees that have been tarmacked, or the ground around the tree has been tarmacked right up to the trunk of the tree. So how's the tree going to survive? We need to be ensuring that developers have a responsibility for those trees and ensuring that trees that go in are not just a number count of, right, okay, we've put in 10 trees here. Yeah, you might have planted 10 trees, but 2 years further on, you've got 10 stubs. We don't want that. We want to be almost forcing the developers to ensure that the trees reach their species potential as soon as possible. So, our green asset management process and register should not be in existence, however, should not be done in isolation. We should not be managing our trees in isolation to our parks or play areas and our drainage elements. Similarly, we should not be managing our footways without consideration to our trees. Because in the real world, they all interact together. So why do we manage them separately? Excuse me. We need to work together to ensure that, for example, gully inspections and clearances are conducted at the right time before a leaf fall, for example. If the tree's due to, if we've got a storm event coming up, let's check our gullies, etc., before that storm event. With our connected asset management, we can similarly engage our contact centre. For example, Mrs. Miggins, yes, it's always Mrs. Miggins, rings up the council to complain about a low-hanging branch over the footway. So what would Mrs. Miggins' perception be if the call taker was able to simply say to Mrs. Miggins where the problem is, and there and then say, okay, Mrs. Miggins, You will be pleased to hear that those trees are scheduled for a crown lift next week. Or a caller rings to complain about the leaves and fruits along Paradise Walk. Sir, we have a team seeing to that issue tomorrow. Imagine if our street cleansing operative notices an issue on a tree. They should be able to report that issue. Similarly, if a play area inspector notices a gully is blocked, we should provide an easy mechanism for him or her to report that issue. Excuse me. I mentioned earlier that engaging the community and them being our eyes and ears on the ground, and Alex will be demonstrating that with an example later on of public engagement. This connectivity should also apply to our assets and not just our management team. We should not be content with just the pocket parks with no green connectivity. We need that green connectivity to facilitate true biodiversity. We don't want our pocket parks to become isolated pocket parks, and that's all part of the whole connected asset management. Okay, I mentioned earlier I was going to touch a little bit on SUDs. Sustainable drainage schemes. Currently, something like 3 million properties are at surface water flood risk in England alone. Our infrastructure must become more resilient, and that's where we need to ensure that we are capturing water where it falls. Even the water butt in your garden attached to your house downpipe can be contributing towards reducing that peak Hortonian overland flow. Little did I think 30 years ago when in my geography class at school I would actually be talking about the principles of Horton. But anyway, so next slide is based on the partnership approach to open spaces and biodiversity from Westminster City Council. And they are looking at the quantity and the quality and the impact of the green infrastructure. And this is the same throughout the green infrastructure plan. That's about protecting, prioritizing, improving biodiversity, improving standards, balancing demands, and providing that benefit of health and well-being, social value, and information and access. Now, I have shown this slide deliberately again. Truly connected asset management means that we can ensure things like sports pitches are marked up correctly in time for community activities. It can also ensure that a visual tree inspection is carried out before the community fight, even my accent, and also to ensure that activities are moved away from habitats of threatened species. All these little bits and pieces, by having that information available within our connected asset management, allow us to provide what's called a single digital view to proactively and reactively manage the world around us by making truly informed decisions. So I will now pass on to Alex.
Thanks for that, Mark. I think Alex was just about to join us just now. Yeah, I think, you know, Steve in his talk really captured the vision of what we need to do, and I think you've highlighted, you know, what we need to do about it. And Alex really will be covering how the technology can help us achieve that. So, Alex, over to yourself.
Thank you, Rob. Can you see my screen and hear me and all? Everything good?
Everything good.
Fantastic. Okay, I've got a lot I'm going to try and fit in 20 minutes. I'm quite bad for this, so I'm just going to dive straight in and hopefully get it in there. I want to start by saying that Alloy is a web-based application that is incredibly flexible, highly configurable, and it allows you to manage a very wide range of assets. So just to give you a quick view of that, currently we've got the carriageway asset displayed in there, but I could turn on car parks, commercial properties, grounds assets, tree assets, gullies, We could do street lighting. I'm not going to do all of them. Traffic signals, but you know, it could be more as well. It could be waste collection and so on and so forth. You know, the list keeps going on. The system is incredibly flexible, and you'll see a little bit of why it is as we sort of go through this presentation. When I say manage assets, I don't actually just mean holding the inventory records that you can sort of see in the map there. It's also about being able to record service requests against them, inquiries and defects. It's about being able to carry out planned and reactive activities like inspections and jobs, and have all of this supported by scheduling, by route planning, by highly configurable workflows, a mobile app that works online and offline, ensuring that your field operatives can will work efficiently and effectively without being limited by the technology. And Alloy can connect to a wide range of systems, sensors, controls and apps. It's been built for a modern world of IoT and smart cities, allowing for data to seamlessly move to where it's needed most. So if a sensor detects something or a member of the public reports something using an app, let's say, that information can flow into Alloy. It can either be manually handled or workflows can pick it up, create an action, and we can go and deal with it. And this kind of technology leads to a clearer and more timely view of your assets and your services and how they're performing. It allows you to react more efficiently to events as they occur, and ultimately it allows for you to deliver more informed decisions about how you manage your assets and deliver your services over the short, medium and long term. So today's presentation has an arboreal focus, so I'm going to turn off a few of these assets. I'd love to talk to you about all of them, but in 20 minutes that's going to be a bit of a push, so I'll leave a few on. There we go. So I've shown you lots and lots of assets displayed in a map, but we can also visualize individual assets or indeed activities or service information in lots and lots of different ways based on the information we hold in the system. So an example I'll give is we can see our trees here, our tree locations, but perhaps we want to view our trees in a different way. So what we could do is turn off the trees layer and maybe turn on the tree maturity layer. So this is all information that I hold against the tree asset, and I can see the styles here displaying the different tree statuses of maturity. It's all dynamic, so I can turn bits on and off. If I don't want to see certain tree types, I can do that. I can use kind of poly select features in the map to then draw polygons around them and edit them, or raise jobs, inspections against them, and so on and so forth. So really nice dynamic spatial visualization, filtering, querying and actioning. We can also view our assets in another way, so, or as many ways as you have data, essentially. So tree physiological condition instead. It's data that we hold against the tree. Let's visualize it. And again, all dynamic, so I can turn styles on and off. And that's really useful. That helps us to understand our tree assets more clearly visually in the map. As they say, a picture paints 1,000 words. But actually, what's also really beneficial is seeing all these layers combined together. It can actually make them kind of greater than the sum of their parts. And I'm just going to nip to another location to sort of talk through an example of this. Oh, not that one. We'll go to this one. There we go. So, it's really useful to know where your trees are relative to your gullies, and I know Mark sort of touched on this before, and you also sort of touched on the fact that leaf fall can contribute to the blockage of gullies. So understanding their proximity can help us to better manage the situation. But the more information, the better, right? It's useful having tree locations here and the gully locations, but if we're emptying the gullies, we can be capturing silt depths as part of that process. And if we have that information in Alloy, we can visualize it. So let's turn on the gully silt depth layer, and you can start to see where we've got blockages, where we've got trees close to those blockages. You might capture other information about what is specifically contributing to that blockage, if it can be determined. And again, it's all just useful information to help us better understand the situation. We could also pull in more information, so maybe flood risk zones from the Environment Agency. So we've got your Zone 2 and your Zone 3 flood risk zones there. again, it's all just about layering information together to see associations, to see trends and patterns, to build a clearer picture of the risk for a particular location, and correspondingly adapt gully emptying and tree pruning programs and regimes to mitigate against this risk. Now, I mean, if you took this situation in a siloed approach, if you took it on in a siloed approach and you adapted the gully emptying regimes without necessarily addressing the trees, or vice versa, you're not necessarily going to solve the problem as effectively. So bringing data sets together can be a really powerful way of improving the way you manage your assets. So we've talked a lot about layers and how we can use those to sort of visualize things within Alloy. I'm now going to show you how you can interact with an individual asset and just find out a lot more about it. And to do that, we either in the cloud system on a desktop or a laptop, just click on it, or if it's on a touchscreen device, you can just tap it with your finger. So it works on multiple devices. And anything you select in Alloy brings up this right-hand information panel that you can see here. So any photographs will display, all the attribute information, any linked items. So we've got reports against it. We've got other components against it, like bat boxes, bird boxes, TPOs, and also we've got risk information as well. So you can see currently it's got a medium-low likelihood, a high consequence, and an overall risk score of 8, which is a medium-low severity. I'm pointing all that stuff out because I'm going to change that on the mobile device later on. So we can visualize quite easily the related attribute information to this tree. If I wanted to understand any historic defects, inspections and jobs, or indeed active ones that have been carried out against this tree, I can do this from this interface. I can also raise new defects, inspections and jobs as well. So let's tap on inspections as an example. We can see here we've had 2 tree health surveys, and you can see the statuses and when they were done recorded there, and I could actually click on one of those records and see all the detail that's recorded as part of that survey if I wanted to investigate further. I can also create new inspections from this location as well. So everything's been built to be very intuitive and very easy. You know, you look at the screen, you interact with it, and you would expect something to be in a certain location, and more often than not, it is. So you know, use the take up of the system, and the user experience is really high. What we can also do is componentize any asset as well. So break it into constituent parts or link it to other sub assets. So if I tap on the component icon there, you can see here that we've got bat box attached to the tree. We've got a bird box, tree lean sensor, and a TPO as well. So if I tap on the bat box record, it actually brings up the bat box asset information. So I mean, that could just be an attribute that you store against the tree, but we see that as an asset, you know, that you might want to manage. So why not have it as an asset in its own right and then relate it to the tree in a component diagram like this. And it's really easy just to sort of navigate up and down these component trees. So we've got a bird box as well, tree lean sensor, and a tree preservation order record as well. Now, of course, this tree can also be part of a park. So, you know, we can build these kind of multi-tiered parent-child relationships. So I can actually link up to Jefferson Gardens. That's the park itself that the tree's in. You can see it's got sort of 35 assets linked to it. But yeah, you know, this is multi-tiered parent-child relationships that allow us to reflect the complex structures of the real world, all those relationships, and map them within our system. And it's one of the key reasons, not the only key reason, but one of the key reasons why Alloy is so flexible and can be used across so many different service areas. So I've given you a very, very quick intro and overview of Alloy, and I'd love to talk to you about so many other things that the system can do, and features and benefits, like inspection programs, maintenance programs, the designer feature that allows you to configure the system to manage different assets and services, workflows that are highly configurable that allow you to build your business logic into the system to ensure that the right actions occur at the right place at the right time, budgeting facilities and so on. But there simply isn't time to go into any of that. So I'm actually going to finish by looking at how the public can efficiently report a service request into Alloy. And to do this, I'm going to use an app called Love Clean Streets, which has been developed by one of our partners, bbits. So I'll just tap on the app there. I've got my phone up. There we go. And it's a really nice app. You essentially have it centered on your GPS location, and it will actually brand the app based on the local authority of that area. So if the local authority use Alloy and they also have the Love Clean Streets service, the service request could go straight into Alloy. I will add that in this demonstration, I'm it's not integrated to the local authority. It's going into my version of Alloy, so I'm not actually going to report a real service request here. And it's also worth pointing out that if the local authority isn't using the Love Clean Streets service, it'll still send an email to the authority, sort of notifying them of this service request. So it's a great app delivering a great public service. So what I'm going to do is take a picture. So just tap the camera icon at the bottom there, take photo, and I'm going to take a photo of what I as a member of the public think is a tree blocking the footpath. Not happy with that. Tap OK. I can select a category, so we can push out of Alloy as many different service request categories as we like. So we've got cleansing, lighting, trees, roads, and the list could go on. But I'm just going to select trees for now. And we can put in a brief description, so blocking path, there we go. And I can even select the tree, the offending tree, and you can see the green point there is actually the asset from Alloy represented in this app. So I can just tap it there, select that is the tree, and tap send. Yes, I'm ready to send. And I'm sending a service request into Alloy from this app. So it is that easy for the public to actually engage with us and identify and notify us of issues. So let's go back to Alloy. It's worth also pointing out that Alloy is an incredibly flexible and connective system, as I've already sort of highlighted. So service requests could come from other sources as well. It could be coming from a CRM. It could be coming from a web form that a member of the public is accessing and inputting information into. It could also actually come from direct input. So it could be a member of call center staff. They've been called up by the member of the public. They're using Alloy directly. They're selecting the asset and they're adding that service request directly to the asset. So there's many ways that we can get these service requests into the system. So this is the tree again. If we go to defects, there we go. You can see here, this is the reported service request that I've just done on the app. It's just come in now. So let's go and have a look at it in a bit more detail. So you can see, yeah, we've got tree issue report. Blocking path is what I wrote. This is the photograph I took. This is the report date and time. And you'll notice there's two linked inspections. So what I've done is I've used the workflow builder in Alloy to build a sequence of events essentially that's going to happen when specific service requests are raised. And in this case, what we've got is linking to the inspections from the service request. We've got two inspections that have been created. We've got a tree visual inspection, which has a target time of 2 days. And that's related directly to assessing whether the service request is actually valid or not. And there's a load of generic questions that we can answer as well. And we've got this proposed tree inspection, which has a month SLA. I've not issued it out, but again, you could if you wanted to. It's all completely configurable. But yeah, a sort of full tree inspection has also been generated. So let's have a quick look at that one first. If you select the record, it just gives you the information that's populated. So obviously the workflow's populated this stuff, but it's not actually populated anything else. If I tap the edit icon though, it will show me all the options available to the inspector when they're out on site. So they'd be able to fill in all of this information. And also, you know, you can define this stuff and add to it. So if you wanted more questions on there, you know, pick lists, yes, nos, text fields, you can build these out to ensure that you're getting the information that you need. So let's have a quick look at the visual inspection as well that was generated. Oh yeah, so our full inspection list now, we've got an issued and a proposed there. The visual inspection, and yeah, you can see the image from the service request has been put into the inspection. So when that goes to the mobile device, I'll be able to see the photo that the member of the public took, which will be really handy for identifying and locating it. We've also got the issue status, the raise times, the target times, and I've also put the risk information from the tree directly into the inspection form. So I can just, from one form, update the risk information if I want to, if I think it's wrong, and that will actually update the asset itself in the cloud system. So you know, these forms can really be configured to give you what you want. And again, if I went into edit just quickly, I can show you all the questions again that I, as an inspector on site, will be able to fill out. Is the service request valid, and that risk information. It's also worth saying that I've actually built the workflow so that this gets put into a project. So I've got a service request tree visual inspections project. It's kind of like an inbox on my mobile device, and as they're raised, these service request visual inspections, they just go into my inbox on the mobile device. So I've got 9 tasks that are available, although I know that some of them have been completed, so I can actually sort of view progress of the project from the cloud system. So we've got 4 open and 5 have been closed. That could also be a color-coded map that's changing as the service requests reviewed. You know, the system's very flexible in this regard. So let's nip to the mobile device. Just minimize that, minimize the phone, and we'll bring up the mobile. So this is Alloy Mobile. I haven't got time to really sort of give you an overview of the interface and whatnot, but big map in the sense that you can pinch zoom with. You've got locate me buttons and sync and so on and so forth, and you can change the orientation of the map. I'm going to go, sorry, I just pressed the hamburger icon in the top left there. I'm going to go straight to my projects folder, because you remember I said I created a service request tree visual inspection project. Tap in there, and it's now centering me in the area where all my tree visual inspections are. I'm going to go down to the bottom one, which is the one in the park that I've just created, and swipe upwards. And that interaction, that's selecting in the map and swiping upwards, is the same whether you're selecting an inspection, a job, an asset, a defect. It really doesn't matter. It's all the same, and it's that consistent interaction that makes the uptake of Alloy in the mobile app so high. You know, people really like interacting with it because it's easy to use. So looking at the tree visual inspection, I've got the details at the top. I've got location information here. Just below, I've got a sat nav icon there, so I can tap that. It takes me into Google satellite navigation, or into Google Maps, and then I can obviously navigate through Google Maps, tapping directions at the bottom, and then pressing the start button to actually navigate. So that obviously factors in real-time traffic information, getting you there as efficiently as possible. You can see originates from this project, the visual inspections project, and also it's linked to this tree. So if I wanted to see more detail about the tree, I can tap on that and access that extra information. I can also pull down the image from the member of the public as well and review that. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill out this form. So I'm going to select team member, which is me. I could do start times and all that stuff. These are the generic questions that I can answer about the tree. Go down to service request requires action at the bottom. Tap that, yes it does. I'm also going to update the risk information to very high and very high, just to sort of clearly show that the risk score is now 25 and urgent, just to sort of really highlight the change. Tap save. That's updating the details. So now in the details form, we should see, yeah, all the information that I populated. I can then maybe say I'm not happy with the picture taken by the member of the public, so I'm going to take my own. So we'll add an attachment, camera. There we go, and just take another picture. So there's 2 pictures now recorded against this inspection. I'm happy with that. And then to complete it, I'm simply going to tap on the status, issued. I'm going to change that to completed and update it. So we've completed the tree visual inspection. What I'm now also going to do is propose a job. So tap that plus button in the bottom right again, add job. And it's going to be tree pruning. Next. I'm going to propose it. I'm going to ask for a crown raise. I'm going to set it as a medium priority. You don't have to set all this stuff. You could just set a few attributes and limit the attributes through permissions, and then workflows populate other bits of information based on the type of job you're creating. I could put in job work items if I wanted to, raise time now, and I'll give it to field team B because that's not my team and I don't want to do the job. There we go. So I'm going to save that, and that's now created a job as well as part of the visual inspection. So the device can auto sync, it can also be manually synced. We've got a sync in progress now. If I go back to the cloud system, what we'll see in a second is that information updated against the tree asset. It's worth pointing out that we've only looked at one example of how the mobile app can be used. So it can also be used for routine inspections, routine maintenance, ad hoc defects being recorded, ad hoc inspections and jobs also being recorded, the addition of new assets into the system, editing asset information, both spatial and attributional. The mobile app is also available on Android and iOS platforms, and it works online and offline, as I discussed earlier, meaning that you don't lose any productivity. So let's go to the tree. And if we go to the service request now, you can see that the service request has been confirmed. Tree issue report confirmed. We can then link to the inspections that were raised as part of the workflow from the service request, and you can see the tree visual inspection has now been completed, and also here's the updated risk information that I populated. Then I can also link to the job that I created. There we go. And actually that's got two attachments. So it's got the image from the service request, and it's also got the image from the inspection. So you've got this full audit trail. You can see from the service request through to the inspection, through to the job, everything that's happened against this asset. And yeah, I could go back to the mobile device and actually update the job, but there's no time. So I'm just going to edit the job here. I'll just complete it. Save that. There we go. And if I was to then go back to the service request, another workflow has remedied the tree defect. So the statuses are constantly updating as this work's happening, and obviously all this information can be pushed back to the member of the public that's reported that service request as well, keeping them informed automatically as your processes kick in and this work is carried out. So that has been an incredibly brief look at Alloy, a couple of examples of how it can help local authorities to better manage their trees and open spaces assets, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alex. That's been really useful. And a lot of information that we've actually gone through today, and it's taken slightly over the allotted time. In terms of questions, if you have got any questions, if you're still here, want to ask, you can pop them in the chat box just now. Seeing as we have gone over, I've put a little announcement in the chat box which gives the address for one of my colleagues. So if you have got questions and would like to email them over, the email address is in there for Sharon, and we will certainly get back to you. The webinar has been recorded, so we will be sending out a link to that to all those that are registered and attended. So thanks very much for that. No questions appearing as such, and we have run over at this moment in time. So I think the important thing here is to thank Steve for his time, for that strategic vision. It was fascinating. Mark, for your expertise in that area, and Alex for that really comprehensive demonstration. It's been really, really useful. So again, thanks everybody for coming along today. As I say, any questions on this, if you'd like to contact us, we'd like to find out more about what we're doing in terms of green infrastructure asset management, then please get in touch with us below. So again, thank you all for attending, and I think we'll leave it at that, and have a good weekend all.